So, Unit 1 here, language of anatomy. And I can't emphasize enough here, Units 1 and 2, the terms we talk about here are going to make your life so much easier down the line. Because a lot of the landmarks, a lot of the bone stuff that we talk about, the terms that we use in Unit 1 and then next week Unit 2, they're going to be used when we talk about those different things. So while your schedules, I know, are crazy busy, got a lot of stuff going on, I can't emphasize to you enough is you do not want to slack these first couple weeks. And make sure we know these terms. It's going to, I can tell you, it's make your life so much easier down the line. So start off your body positions. First one here, standing straight up and down here, palms facing forward. We call that the anatomical position. And we're going to refer to this a lot throughout the semester. So the anatomical position, standing straight up and down, and your palms are facing forward. The fundamental position is very similar, but the only difference is palm position. Notice that the palms are facing the thighs here, facing in. So anatomical and fundamental positions, pretty much the same. The only difference are the hand positions. We've also got two horizontal positions we're going to talk about. First one is lying on your back. We call that supine. Supine. And when I see the word supine, I want to think spine. Okay, so that means you're laying on your spine, essentially laying on your back. So supine, where your back is down. Prone is the opposite. Prone is where you're laying on your stomach. So supine, think laying on your spine. Prone is the opposite of that. Next section, body orientation and directions. So essentially, we're going to use these terms, okay, to help us know where are different parts, different landmarks, things like that, where they're located on the body. And essentially, I'm just going to kind of go down in order in that lab manual there. So to start here, let's take a look at anterior and posterior. Anterior and posterior, though they are opposites of one another. Anterior, think anteater. Anteater's got that awesome head there. Okay? Use it to lick up ants. Anterior means in front. Anterior in front. Anterior anteater, got the funky head. Okay? That's in the front. To the back is posterior. Okay? Posterior, think like your rump, your buttocks. You could also think about it like pre and post. Okay? Pre meaning before, post meaning back. So posterior means behind. So anterior in front, posterior in back. Next up, we got above and below. Okay? Specifically, superior, meaning above. If you think about your bosses, okay? They're your superiors. They are above, okay, on that hierarchy. So superior means above. Inferior, kind of like the employees, okay? They are below. Superior above, inferior below. Take a look at the picture on the right. So facing the front, if I draw a straight line that cuts a person into two sides here, we call this the midline. And so if we've got the terms medial, that means closer to the midline. Medial, closer to the midline. Lateral, going away from the midline. If we got any football fans in here, if quarterback Cam Newton here is pitching the ball away from him, we call that a lateral. So lateral, going away from the midline. All right, let's skip proximal distal. We'll next go to dorsal and ventral. Now, I put dorsal next to posterior and ventral next to anterior. And essentially what they mean are the same things. So ventral is the same thing as anterior. Ventral means in front. But kind of more specifically, it means stomach side. Ventral means stomach side. Dorsal, towards the back, that's going to be behind. Now, ventral and dorsal, they're more used when talking about animals. So for the most part in class, I'm going to use anterior and posterior. But understand that ventral is the same thing as anterior, and dorsal is the same thing as posterior. And how I like to think about it, here's ventral, think about venting. First week, syllabus week, classes are going long, start venting to your friend there. And when we talk, okay, it comes out the front. Okay. So ventral, stomach side. Dorsal, kind of like a shark, it has a dorsal fin on its back. Okay. So same thing there, dorsal, posterior, along the back. Similarly, cephalic is similar to superior, and caudal is similar to inferior. And those, again, are animal terms. But specifically, cephalic is toward the head. Okay, it's not above. Cephalic is toward the head. While caudal is toward the feet. Not necessarily below, okay, towards the feet. Now, how can these terms be used? Okay, because I'm throwing a lot of different directions here. Let's take a look. For example, okay, let's take superior. I can say my head is superior to my stomach. My head is above my stomach, so my head is superior to my stomach. Take a look at this guy here. Okay, I can say his hands are lateral to his hips. Okay? They're further away from the midline. So hands are lateral to his hips. Now, let's say, okay, we've got a person laying down. So let me draw that here real quick. So the person's laying down. If I want to say my toes are blank to my feet, or my toes are blank to my heels. So my toes compared to my heels. So if I'm laying down, okay, toes would be inferior, okay, to my heels. So be careful with body position too. Okay? We're assuming for the most part we're going to talk about anatomical position. But if the person's switched around, this might make a difference. Let's take another one here. So if I say my head is blank to my feet. So if I'm laying down here, okay, we talked before, when standing up, head was superior to my feet. But if I'm laying down, my head is not superior to my feet. I could say that my head is cephalic. To my feet. It's closer to the head. So just be aware of their body position. Understand where that is and how that comes into play. Any questions? Next two, let's go back up to proximal and distal. And those terms, okay, are based on how close something is to the point of attachment or the trunk, essentially. So for example here, I can say that my shoulders are proximal to my hands. So my shoulders are closer to my trunk compared to my hands. I can say my elbows are proximal to my hands. They're closer to the trunk. Distal is the opposite. I can say my fingertips are distal to my elbows. Because again, they're on the appendages and they're further away. Proximal, distal there. Last two, superficial and deep. So if we use the earth as an example, I can say that the crust of the earth, so essentially where the water is, where the land is, that is superficial to the core. It's further to the outside. Deep, okay, means closer to the middle. So the core is deep to the crust. If we're talking anatomy here, I can say my skin is superficial to my muscles. My skin is on the outside. Likewise, most bones are going to be deep compared to my muscles. So superficial, deep. You could also say that Arnold Schwarzenegger is superficial, okay? But the Terminator is deep, because deep down we all know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is. I'll be back. So those are the last two terms there, okay, talking about directions. Section 3 here, body planes. Body planes. Now, with our body planes, we've got 3 planes of the body that we're going to look at. And essentially, to kind of get you an idea of what a plane is, think about the floor. Think about the wall. Think about the ceiling. Think about a tabletop. But think about them as they're going on forever in that direction. So if I took my tabletop here and I extended it all the way, okay, past the wall, keep going on and on and on forever. Okay. So that's what a plane is. Now we've got 3 different kinds of planes based off of what direction do they go on and on and on forever. First one here is the sagittal plane. Sagittal, I'm thinking sides. One thing to note, remember we've got 2 T's in the word sagittal. So a sagittal plane is one that splits the body, okay, into a left and a right side. Splits the body in 2. Another way to think about it is you take a look at these jerseys down here, LeBron James, okay? Half of his body is Cleveland Cavaliers, half of his jersey is Los Angeles Lakers. And if I put, okay, this big old piece of paper all the way through, cut them directly in half, okay, that's essentially what a sagittal plane is. So if we think take this piece of cardboard as our sagittal plane, okay, if I put it directly in the middle, okay, this is considered a sagittal plane. It's cutting me into a left and a right side. Now, there's unlimited amount of planes, sagittal planes. My sagittal plane could cut me directly in the middle. It could cut me here, where I got more on my right side, less on my left. It could cut me over here. Okay? So there's unlimited number of sagittal planes. Another plane we got is the frontal, or you could call it the coronal plane. Coronal meaning crown. And this splits the body into a front and a back side. Or how I like to say it, it splits it up into an anterior and posterior side. If you think Mickey Mouse ears, if you think a headband, if I put a headband on, okay, essentially it's like cutting my head, okay, where I've got half in front and a chunk in back. And again, just like the sagittal plane, I've got unlimited number of frontal planes. So if I turn to the side here, I can cut my body like this, like this, like this, like this, like this. Okay. I've got unlimited number of frontal planes there. Lastly, transverse. Transverse. Okay. I like to think about transportation by trains. Unlike a helicopter or plane that can go up and down, trains have to go flat, okay, along the surface. So a transverse plane, okay, is one that cuts the body into a superior and inferior sections. Again, I could cut me directly in the middle. Come up higher, okay, go lower. So I've got unlimited number of transverse planes. Another way to think about it is a belt. Okay. So a belt here. If I put a piece of paper all the way through that belt, okay, essentially I can cut my entire body in half. Now, where does this become important? Okay. We often talk about these when we look at movements. So we can get Marcia up here. The way I like to think about it is I can talk about a movement in a plane if they fit into a hallway. So the idea I want you to think about here is think about we have two planes. Okay, planes go in the same direction, and they make this really tight hallway. So for example here, if Marcia's going to come here, she's going to put the cardboard by my head. You got that there?
There we go.
Okay. All right. So right now I'm in a sagittal plane hallway, because these planes divide me into two. Now if I'm in this really tight sagittal plane hallway, can barely get my head in here, what direction can my head move? So if I try to twist my head, run into the sides of my hallway, I can't move. If I try to go like this, can't do that. I'm going to run into the sides of my hallway. But if I nod my head, that works in my sagittal plane hallway. So that's taking my head. How about let's take a look at my arm. Or actually, let's go torso here. We'll go torso. Okay. So body standing here, my torso. Okay. I can't twist. Okay. I run into the edges of my hallway. I can't go side to side. Run to the edges of my hallway. But I can bow. Bowing works in my sagittal plane hallway. Good. Thank you, Marcia. Few other ideas. Okay. Okay, a karate chop. Okay. This is sagittal plane here. Karate chop is sagittal plane. If I'm walking, that's sagittal plane. Okay. If I kick straight ahead, that's sagittal plane. So all those different movements there we would call considered sagittal plane movements. Let's take a look at frontal plane, coronal. So Marcia, you can come on over here. Let's take a look at, just come over to, we'll just cover my arm. Yep, all right. Let's come over closer. Good. All right, let's just put this on the back so we can see. So we'll put this one down. This one up. Good. All right. So I'm in my frontal plane hallway. Pretend that, or put, actually, Marcia, bring that one right here. We'll go right there. Good. So if I'm in my frontal plane hallway, I can't come forward because I'm going to hit that one wall. Okay. I can't twist, okay, because my fingers are going to hit the wall. But I can go like this. Okay. So this here, so if you're thinking butterfly, kind of essentially coming out of the water, they're part of the butterfly. Okay. That would be considered a frontal plane movement. A jumping jack. That's going to be a frontal plane movement. If I tip my head to the side, thinking side bends here. Those are all frontal plane movements. Transverse. Put this note down here. If you see any rotation, any twist, any rotation, okay, 99% of the time that is going to be a transverse plane movement. For example here, if I've got, okay, my hands are my two transverse planes, the transverse plane hallway. Okay, I can't nod my head. Okay, I can't go side to side, but I can twist. So shaking your head no, that'd be an example of a transverse plane movement. My arm here. Okay. So here's the bottom of the transverse plane. Okay. So if I go side to side, kind of like I'm wiping the table, this is a transverse plane movement. If I'm here with my body and I twist left and right, okay, kind of like you're doing bicycle crunch. Okay. That's a transverse plane movement. This one here, okay, I'm moving at my shoulder. If I go like this, this is a transverse plane movement. So any sort of twisting movement, any sort of rotational movement, that's considered transverse plane movement. All right, next what we got are regional terms. Okay, and then these are different parts of the body, different locations. Let's start off with two parts of the skeleton. You've got the axial skeleton, which is made up of the head, neck, ribs, and spine. Then we got the appendicular skeleton, which are your appendages. Notice they're very similar. Appendicular appendages. Those refer to your arms and your legs. And essentially, these two portions of the skeleton refer to different purposes, different parts. And the way I like to think about it here is in terms of a wheel. The axle allows the wheels to spin. Likewise, the axial skeleton allows the appendages, or the appendicular skeleton, to move. Essentially, the axial skeleton has to stay strong, stay stable, so that the arms and legs can move whichever directions they want. Next up, we're going to talk about regional terms of the torso. Starting at the top, we got cervical region, which refers to the neck. Cervical neck. Thoracic, this region refers to the thorax. That's where thoracic comes from, thorax, otherwise known as the chest region. Essentially what you want to think about it is if you took your rib cage, okay, everything in side of your rib cage, okay, and along your rib cage there, that's considered your thoracic region. A lot of times people refer to this as your upper back. Next up we got the lumbar region, lumbar lower back region. This would also include your stomach, lumbar region, lower back. And then we got the sacral region. This is the very lowest part of your spine. And essentially what happens here is these are where your hip bones connect. So if I go back, take a look at axial skeleton, notice this is the sacral region. Again, this is where your hip bones are located. So the sacral region is the lowermost portion of your back. So starting at the top, you got cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. Next up, regional terms of the appendicular skeleton. Starting on the left here, palmar. Thinking palm. This refers to the palm of your hand. Similarly, plantar refers to the sole of your foot. And I like to think about this in two different ways. One, plants come from the ground. So plantar means the part of your body that is touching the ground, which is the bottom of your foot. Another way I like to think about it is in terms of athletics. If I'm going to change directions, I'm going to stick my foot out and plant it into the ground. And the part of your foot that hits the ground there is going to be the bottom of your foot, the sole of your foot, the plantar region. Take a look here. Axillary. Axillary meaning armpit. And now notice axillary is similarly spelled to axial. But notice it's different. And this is why spelling is so important, and which is why next week on the quiz, make sure that you keep spelling on point, on top. So make sure spelling is where it needs to be. Forearm. It's the region between your elbows and your wrists. The forearm. All of your arm, that's considered the brachial region. I like to think brachial, biceps, both start with the letter B. So brachial refers to the entire arm. Femoral, thinking femur, this refers to your thigh. Femoral, femur, thigh. And finally, the distance between your knee to your ankle is called your shank. And how I like to remember it as a Packers fan is Mr. Gary Anderson. Back in 1998, Gary Anderson was the kicker for the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings were killing the NFL that year. They're 15-1, and odds-on favorites to win the Super Bowl until they met the Atlanta Falcons. They weren't exactly their hot stuff. Things weren't clicking, but they were still in position to win. Mr. Gary Anderson, Mr. Clutch Gary Anderson, there to kick a field goal at the end of the game. And needless to say, even though he's clutch during the regular season, come playoff times, not so much. He shanked that ball. Atlanta Falcons went on to the Super Bowl. As a Green Bay Packers fan, I'm happy. So, thank you, Mr. Gary Anderson, helping you understand what a shank is. Next section, the shape of bones. I'm not going to quiz you on this, but I just want you to have a general idea of what these terms mean. So starting on the left there, the long bones, any bones that are long. The thin, duh, you're talking about your leg, your arm, or your fingers. Those are long bones. Short bones, like the bones of your wrist, they're the opposite. They're really small, compact. Those are short bones. Flat bones, whether on your shoulder blades, your pelvic bones, your sternum, they're all flat, kind of like a sheet of paper. Then we got irregular bones, whether it's your vertebrae or some bones of your skull. They don't fit a really specific shape there. So those are, again, our general shape of bones. I'm not going to quiz you on it. I'm just going to have a general idea of what those are about. All right, last section here. Talking about bony contours, projections, and depressions. Essentially what these are going to be the landmarks of your bones. Specific parts on the bones. And depending on what they are, Okay, they have different functions. Okay, for example, some are places where arteries and nerves travel. Some are places where tendons or ligaments attach. So there's a lot of different characteristics of bones, okay, and that's what these are. Let's start with articulating surfaces. Where you see articulating, this is where two bones come together. So articulating is where two bones come together. Oftentimes there will be cartilage, which, not to go into too much detail, essentially is like a shock absorber that allows the bones to slide past one another without irritating anything. But articulating surfaces where two bones come together. And what we've got here is we've got condyles, we've got facets, we've got heads. What a condyle is going to be a projection, something that sticks out of the end of a long bone. So for example here, we've got a femur. Okay, these things, these condyles, things that project off of the end. So that's a condyle. A facet is going to be a flat surface where two bones meet. And oftentimes you'll see those on vertebrae. Notice how flat these are. Essentially, these are where the vertebrae, okay, one place where they articulate with each other. And then we've got head. The head is an enlarged end of a long bone. Now notice this is different than a condyle. Condyle is a projection that comes off of it. Versus the head, the entire end gets big. Another way to kind of think about it, okay, an analogy. So I took my hand here, okay. My entire hand would consider to be kind of like the head, okay, because out of my wrist here, it's a big enlarged end. Versus my thumb is similar to a condyle because it kind of sticks out. Okay. It's not the entire end, but it's just one portion. Okay, but that's an analogy. Now, so you guys understand here for the quiz next week, I'm not going to ask you name me a specific condyle. Like, they've got examples there. Name me a specific condyle. I'm not going to ask you that because we have not gone through the different bones or those different landmarks. So I'm not going to ask that. But what I might do is I might give you a definition and say, name this articulating surface. So that's how those kind of questions are going to work next week. So, this slide and the next slide, we've got non-articulating surfaces. So articulating, two bones come together. Non-articulating means they're parts of the bones that do not touch another bone. These surfaces are where tendons and ligaments and other connective tissue are going to attach. So let's start off with a crest. Crest there, okay, it's kind of like a raised elevation off of a bone. Any dinosaur fans, you know this is a Dilophosaurus or Dilophosaurus. It got a big old crest on its head. Okay. Round, okay, elevated. Similarly, okay, on your pelvic bones, okay, you got a crest. So this portion, consider that a crest. Epicondyle, those are projected surfaces that are just above the condyles, just superior to the condyles. Or if you want to be very specific, they are immediately proximal to the condyles. So we talked again, this section here, this is a condyle. These are going to be considered epicondyles. Styloid process. Styloid, think stylus. Some of you use this on an iPad or computer. What I like to think about it, it's a pen, it's a writing utensil. These are projections, okay, that are very, 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 very sharp. Very, very, very sharp projections. while not shown, okay, process. So just the word process. If you ever see the word process, it's just a part of the bone that sticks out. It's a projection. Okay, so that's a general term. So styloid process, it has a very pointy, very sharp projection. A spine is also like a projection, but notice it's not nearly as sharp as that styloid process. It's a raised surface there. We've got some on our pelvic bones. Got one here, 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 and here. We've also got one on the back of your shoulder blades. If you take your hand, okay, you feel the back, okay, you feel your traps here, they go just below that. Okay. That's going to be the spine of your scapula. Big Spinosaurus. Dinosaur fans got a big old spine on its back. Kind of a similar idea. Finish up the non-articulating surfaces. We've got trochanters, tuberosities, and tubercles. 3 T's. I'm not going to ask you to know the definitions, the differences between these 3 different definitions, because essentially they're all the same. They're elevated surfaces. Essentially is all they're in. One of the big differences just is that they're different sized. Trochanters are really big. Tubercles are kind of big. Tuberosities are a little bit small. But again, I won't ask you to know the difference. Just kind of know it's kind of a raised surface, kind of a projection off of the bone. Last 2 slides here. Depressions. Depression, think depressed, think going down into. So what these surfaces, okay, think of it kind of like a valley. Think about it like holes. Think of it like a divot. Think of it like a crater. Essentially, that's what all of these surfaces are. So start with your foramen. Foramen means hole. Here's a hole in the bottom of our skull, which happens to be where the spinal cord travels through. But foramen, wherever you see that, we're thinking hole. Fossa. This is a shallow depression, okay, into a bone. And what here we got here is the mandibular fossa. Essentially, this is where the jaw comes in contact with the skull. Okay, so where it comes in contact, this depression is kind of like a little notch there where the jaw can pivot. That's what's considered a fossa. Fovea. Fovea is considered a small pit. And you can find this in the femur. At the head of the femur, there's a small pit right there. So think fovea is a pit, not like a divot. Meatus, this is the entrance to an opening or a canal. Entrance to an opening or a canal. And it's specifically this one. This is the entrance. This meatus is the entrance to your ear canal. Okay? So that's where sound travels. Okay? So where you can see. That's where the vibrations go down. Or not see, that's where you can hear. So meatus, the entrance to a canal or tunnel. Last 3. We've got groove. Groove is kind of like a valley. Long valley there. Or kind of like a canyon between 2 landmarks on a wall. Goes down. So if you're carving, like some kids would do back in elementary school, carve into the desks there. That's kind of essentially what a groove is. A notch, that's kind of like a bite out of a bone. Okay? big chunk has been taken out of the bone there. That's what we consider a notch. And then we've got sinus. Sinus is going to be a cavity, open cavity in the bone. Think of it kind of like a cave. Okay? So in a cave, you go through a small opening, and then all of a sudden you get in the middle of the cave, and it's ginormous. Okay? Lots and lots of space. That's what's a sinus considered. It's a cavity. Big open area. Any questions there about those notes? Lastly, a couple things I want to point out. So on D2L, and again, you've got all those PowerPoints already been uploaded, so you got those to take a look at. Now for these first two quizzes, okay, I provided an example quiz. And I made it like a super quiz. The quiz next week is only going to be 21 questions. One of them is going to be extra credit. But this super quiz this has got anywhere between 70 to 100 questions. And the reason I kind of want to give you that ahead of time here is so you kind of have an idea of what the quizzes are going to look like. It's a mix of multiple choice, it's a mix of matching. And the reason it has to do that is because Google Forms can't tell you what the right answer is if I give you a short answer. So yes, please make sure again you know how to spell. Make sure you know how to spell next week. There will be some questions that are you have to write the answer, you're not given multiple answers to look at. So be careful with that. But this has got, I've done a ton of different questions there. So make sure, again, take a look at that, use that to practice. And the nice thing about it is it will mix up the order of the questions every time. So you can take it as many times as you want, and the order will be mixed up. So you might have, the first question might be talking about body regions. The next section might be, or question might be talking about planes. And if you retake it again, maybe the next section is talking about depressions. So feel free to use that there, use that to your advantage. Whew, I'm sorry. Next week, we'll be working a lot more with the bones. Okay, we'll be taking a look at the skull there. So that will be hopefully a little bit more hands-on. So we've got that to look at. Again, feel free to use the rest of this time at the end of class. If you got any questions, if you want to review things, please go ahead and do that. I'll stick around for as long as needed. Remember, the picture on D2L is due next week. Have a great day.